The Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Their fleet stretched across the spiral arms of the galaxy, their banners hanging proudly on every world they conquered. To them, no other race could rise to challenge their power. They had seen countless species crawl out of their homeworlds, build ships and attempt to touch the stars, only to be crushed, enslaved, or absorbed into the Empire's endless rule. To the Empire, history was simple. They were the masters, and the rest of the galaxy was beneath them. But history was about to change. Far away, in the cold emptiness beyond their borders, the Empire's long-range sensors picked up strange signals. At first, the analysts thought it was noise. Radio chatter, primitive frequencies, the kind young species used before they learned the true science of hyperspace communication. The signals seemed old-fashioned, almost laughable. But then, something in the data caught the attention of an elder scientist. The patterns were too sharp, too deliberate. They were not noise. They were blueprints. Blueprints for machines the Empire had never seen before. At first, the scientists laughed. Surely no race could design engines like these. Engines that bent, space without fuel, that folded gravity like a sheet of paper. The diagrams showed weapons that could cut through shields as if they were not even there. Ships that looked small, but carried power greater than dreadnoughts. The engineers stared in silence. For the first time in generations, they had no explanation. The Council of Admirals gathered in the capital. Old generals, scarred by wars long past, sat around the glowing table, studying the human transmissions. Some dismissed it as lies, tricks, made to confuse them. Others felt a creeping fear. What if it was real? What if some new power had risen in the dark, and the Empire was no longer supreme? The Emperor himself, a ruler who had never known fear, demanded proof. Scouts were sent to the edge of the humans' claimed space. They expected to find a backward race, perhaps clever, but still primitive compared to the might of the Empire. They expected weak ships, eager diplomats, and the usual begging for protection. What they found instead was something that shook them to their core. A single human ship waited at the border. It was not large, not compared to the massive battleships of the Empire. Its hull was dark, almost ordinary, with no glowing energy cores, no giant cannons visible on its sides. To the Empire's eyes, it looked plain. But the scanners told another story. The readings made no sense. The ship's mass shifted like a mirage, as if reality itself could not decide what it was made of. Energy signatures spiked into levels no Empire vessel had ever reached, then dropped back to zero, as if the ship was both alive and asleep at the same time. The Empire commander, a veteran of countless wars, gave the order to open a channel. He expected arrogance. He expected a proud rising power demanding respect. Instead, the human captain's voice was calm, even friendly. "You've crossed into Terran space. State your purpose." The commander demanded identification. He wanted to know what kind of engines the ship used, what weapons it carried, what technology could possibly create such impossible readings. The human only replied with words that unsettled the entire crew. "This is standard." The commander frowned. Standard? No. This could not be standard. Nothing about this ship was standard. Not in any galaxy the Empire knew. To prove his point, the commander ordered a scan. The Empire cruiser released its strongest sensors, piercing into the human ship. For a brief moment, the data came in, and then vanished. The cruiser's systems went dark, screens blank, weapons unpowered, engines silent. In an instant, centuries of engineering and design failed. The crew panicked, alarms screamed, and the commander's heart froze. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything came back online. The systems lit up again, the engines roared, and the crew gasped in confusion. On the screen, the human captain had not moved. He simply said, "Don't do that again." The Empire's cruiser had been shut down, completely, absolutely, by a single human ship. Not destroyed, not attacked, just switched off, like a toy in a child's hands. The commander wanted to retaliate, to fire, to prove the Empire was not weak, But deep inside he knew the truth. If the humans had wanted, that one ship could have erased them without a sound. Back in the capital, the news spread quickly. Admirals argued. Some claimed it was illusion. Some said it was sorcery, but no one could explain what they had seen. The humans had shown power beyond comprehension, and they had called it basic engineering. The Empire, a civilization that had ruled the stars for millennia, was shaken. For the first time in living memory, they were no longer certain of their supremacy. The whispers began. Soldiers spoke of humans as gods. Scientists muttered that the laws of physics had been rewritten. Politicians feared rebellion, for if the humans sided with their enemies, the empire could crumble overnight. And in the shadows of the throne room, the emperor himself stood in silence. His hands trembled, though no one dared to notice. He looked at the reports, at the impossible data, at the words repeated again and again. This is standard. What kind of race called the impossible ordinary? And more importantly, what would they do next? The halls of the Galactic Empire's high command had never been so restless. Generals who once barked orders with unshakable pride now spoke, in whispers, their voices carrying an edge of doubt. The reports from the border were clear. One human ship had disabled an Empire cruiser without firing a single shot. It had not destroyed the vessel. It had not even scratched the hull. It had simply turned it off, like flicking a candle flame with a breath. The Admiralty tried to downplay the incident. They told the Emperor it was an anomaly, perhaps a trick of faulty equipment. But in the silence of their private chambers, they confessed the truth. They were afraid. The Emperor, however, was not a man who accepted fear. He ordered another test. This time, not a single cruiser, but an entire observation fleet would approach Terran space. 50 destroyers, 10 heavy cruisers, and a battleship older than most civilizations in the galaxy. They were not sent to conquer, at least not openly. They were sent to observe. The orders were clear: engage only if attacked, but scan the humans thoroughly. The Empire needed answers. When the fleet entered Terran space, they expected resistance. They expected the humans to bristle, to posture with fleets of their own. Instead, what greeted them was silence. No swarm of ships, no desperate diplomats. Just one human vessel again, this time larger, sleeker, with a hull that shimmered as if reality bent around it. The flagship commander sneered. "They think one ship can stand against us?" he asked, his officers nodding eagerly, though their eyes betrayed unease. The Empire launched its scans. Beams of energy swept across the human ship, digging for weaknesses, for fuel sources, for the hidden engines that powered its strange existence. For a moment, data poured in, and then the data grid changed. Instead of ship schematics, the Empire's screens filled with images of themselves. One officer gasped as he saw his own face staring back from the console. Another saw the memory of his homeworld streets, broadcast across the bridge. The scans had been turned inward. The humans were not only resisting, they were peering back. Panic rippled through the fleet. The commander ordered weapons powered, not to fire, but to prepare for the unknown. That was when the human vessel moved. Not fast, not aggressive. Just a small shift. Space rippled like water disturbed by a stone. Every ship in the observation fleet felt it. The air grew heavy. The engines groaned. The battleship's captain swore his ship had suddenly aged 100 years. Metal creaked. Systems flickered. It was as if time itself was pressing down on them. Then, just as suddenly, the pressure vanished. The human captain's voice came over the comms. Calm, cold, almost bored. "We told you once. Do not scan us." The commander clenched his fists. He could not admit defeat, not in front of his men, not in front of the Empire. He barked the order: "Fire warning shots. Show them we are not afraid." Dozens of plasma cannons lit up the void, their energy streaking across the stars. The human ship did not dodge. It did not shield itself. The blasts simply disappeared, not absorbed, not deflected. They just ceased to exist, vanishing mid-space as though they had never been fired at all. The crews of the Empire's destroyers screamed. Even the battleship fell silent, its gunners frozen in disbelief. Then came the reply. The human vessel did not fire. It did not unleash beams of light or missiles. Instead, the void itself bent. A wave of invisible force rippled outward, passing through every Empire ship. Engines died. Weapons dimmed. Screens went black. Entire crews sat helpless, floating like corpses in space. But the humans were not cruel. After 10 long, breathless minutes, the systems returned. Ships came back online, crews stumbling as life returned to their vessels. The human captain's voice echoed one last time. This was restraint. Do not test us again. The Empire fleet limped home. Not one ship had been destroyed. Not one soul had been lost. And yet the loss was greater than any battlefield defeat. The Empire's pride was shattered. Their war machines had been made powerless in an instant. Back in the capital, the council erupted in chaos. Some shouted that humanity must be destroyed at all costs before their influence spread. Others whispered that war was suicide, that the humans were not conquerors but something far worse, beings who rewrote the laws of the universe itself. Scientists tore apart the data. They found no answers. They argued late into the night, some claiming the humans had discovered new physics, others saying they had stepped beyond science entirely. One young researcher finally whispered what none dared to say aloud. It is not advanced. It is impossible. That word spread. Impossible. Not superior, not stronger, not faster. Impossible. The soldiers in the barracks muttered it like a curse. The nobles at their feasts repeated it in hushed tones. Even the emperor, pacing in his private chambers, found the word echoing in his mind. Impossible. But one thought burned brighter than fear. The Empire could not allow this to continue. If humanity's power grew unchecked, every rebellion, every rival, every subject race would turn to them for salvation. The Empire's iron grip would crumble overnight. The Emperor made his decision. If humans could not be explained, they would be tested again. And this time, the test would not be observation. It would be war. The Empire's capital world had always been a place of order. Towers of black stone rose into the skies, glowing banners of the Emperor hung over every square, and soldiers marched in endless parades to remind citizens that their rulers were strong, eternal, unshakable. But now, the streets carried whispers. The people had heard rumors of a species beyond the borders, a race called humans, who had faced the mighty fleets of the Empire and walked away untouched. In the palace, the Emperor sat alone in his throne chamber. The vast room was silent yet heavy with unease. He had ruled for centuries. He had crushed rebellions with a glance, silenced dissent with a word. He had never known fear. And yet, since the humans appeared, sleep no longer came easily. Reports haunted him. Ships disabled without fire. Weapons erased like shadows. Captains returning pale, their voices trembling when they spoke the name Terrans. The Council of Admirals gathered once more. They stood around the hollow table where recordings of the last encounter played in silence. The images showed plasma bolts vanishing into nothing, Empire ships drifting powerless, and the human vessel, untouched, motionless, like a god watching ants. "This is unacceptable," one admiral barked, slamming his fist against the table. "They humiliate us with tricks. They must be destroyed before the people lose faith." Another shook his head. "Destroyed? With what? You saw it. Our weapons did nothing. They didn't even fight us. They just turned us off like machines. Tell me, what army can face an enemy that bends the laws of nature itself?" The chamber erupted in argument. Some demanded war. Others begged for caution. A few whispered the unthinkable, that perhaps the Empire should try peace or even alliance. The Emperor listened in silence. His golden eyes scanned the faces of his generals. For the first time he saw cracks. Unity was gone. Fear had crept into their bones. The mighty Empire was fracturing, Not from outside attack, but from within. Outside the palace, whispers turned into voices. Soldiers in the barracks murmured about the humans. Some called them demons. Others called them saviors. If they wanted, one soldier whispered, they could free every world we have conquered. They could end the empire tomorrow. The nobles felt the shift as well. At their banquets, they lowered their voices when the topic arose. Some feared losing their power. Others dreamed of siding with humans if rebellion came. Even the common people sensed change. For generations they had lived under the Empire's iron rule. But now they wondered, if the humans were real, could freedom finally exist? Meanwhile, in the secret halls of the Imperial Science Bureau, the brightest minds tore apart the collected data. They studied every pulse, every wave, every flicker of human power. Days turned into weeks, and still there were no answers. Their weapons operated outside known physics. Their engines broke every rule. The oldest scholars, trembling, admitted that what they saw should not exist. One finally spoke the forbidden thought aloud. Perhaps they are not inventors. Perhaps they are rediscoverers. What if the humans have uncovered truths the universe itself had hidden from us? The room fell silent. None dared to agree, but none dared to deny it. The Emperor's patience thinned. Enough of this weakness, he declared. We are the Empire. We do not kneel. If they wield impossible power, then we will tear the secret from their hands. His words struck like thunder, but even thunder could not silence doubt. Admirals exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time in the Empire's history, their loyalty wavered. Then came the spark that turned whispers into fire. On a distant border world, a group of civilians rioted. They carried crude signs painted with one word: humans. They shouted in the streets, demanding the Empire step down before the impossible ones. Soldiers opened fire to silence them, but the message had already spread across subspace. Millions watched the footage. To the oppressed, the humans became a symbol of hope. To the rulers, they became a symbol of rebellion. Fear twisted into paranoia. Some admirals began arresting officers they suspected of being sympathetic to humans. Politicians accused rivals of plotting to surrender to the Terrans. Families were torn apart as loyalty to the Empire clashed with hope for something new. The Emperor realized too late what was happening. The humans had not fired a single shot, and yet they had already shaken the Empire to its foundations. In the shadows, one of the Emperor's most trusted advisors leaned close. If we strike now, the advisor whispered, we may still crush them. But if we hesitate, they will not need to fight us. We will destroy ourselves. The Emperor clenched his jaw. His pride screamed for war. His mind whispered caution. But his heart, dark and furious, chose vengeance. He raised his hand and declared, prepare the fleets. If the humans are impossible, then let us show them the impossible might of the Empire. Across the stars, the order was given. Armies gathered, war drums thundered. Yet in the silence of their barracks, in the shadows of their palaces, in the secret corners of their hearts, many wondered if they were marching to victory or to doom. And somewhere beyond the borders, the humans watched, silent, waiting. Subway, Empire's fleets had gathered like a storm. Hundreds of warships lined the void, their black hulls reflecting the cold light of distant stars. Battleships older than empires drifted at the center, surrounded by cruisers, destroyers, and carriers, bristling with fighters. The order was clear. Test humanity once more. This time not with scans, not with words, but with fire. The Emperor had chosen the battlefield carefully. A border colony called Varus, a world rich in resources, lay just outside Terran space. The humans had claimed it as theirs, though the Empire considered it part of their dominion. The decision was made. Strike there, prove the Terrans were mortal, and silence the whispers that spread rebellion across the galaxy. On the morning of the attack, the citizens of Varus looked up to see the skies darken. Empire warships blotted out the sun, casting shadows over the cities below. Panic spread. People ran into shelters, Children cried, alarms blared. For them, this was the end. But the humans were already there. A single Terran frigate hovered in orbit, small and unassuming. Compared to the Empire Armada, its hull shimmered faintly, bending light as though it existed slightly out of sync with reality. On its bridge, the captain stood calm, watching as an entire empire arrayed itself against him. "They want a show of power," he said quietly, to his crew. "Then we'll give them one." The Empire Admiral's voice echoed across the comms, sharp and filled with arrogance. "This is Imperial space. Withdraw immediately, or be destroyed." The human captain did not reply. Instead, his ship moved, just slightly, a slow drift forward as if daring them to fire. The Admiral snarled. He had no choice. If he retreated, the Emperor would call him a coward. If he hesitated, the whispers of rebellion would grow louder. His hand cut through the air. "All ships, fire!" The void lit up with fury. Plasma bolts, missiles, and beams of energy roared toward the human frigate. Hundreds of weapons from dozens of ships converged into one storm of destruction. The skies burned bright, drowning out the stars, and then nothing. The weapons vanished before they struck. The blasts did not explode, did not even miss. They simply ceased to exist, erased as though they had never been fired. The space around the human frigate remained calm, silent, untouched. On the Empire bridges, panic spread. Gunners slammed controls again and again, desperate to fire. Some weapons refused to engage. Others fired and vanished once more. Entire fleets poured their fury into the void, and the void swallowed it whole. Then, the human frigate answered, not with guns, not with missiles, but with gravity itself. A ripple pulsed outward from the ship, invisible yet unstoppable. Empire destroyers screamed as their hulls bent and twisted, engines tearing free as if yanked by unseen hands. Cruisers spun wildly, their systems overloaded, sparks bursting from every console. Even the mighty battleship groaned, its armored plates buckling as though the weight of a planet pressed upon it. In less than a minute, half the fleet was disabled. Ships drifted powerless, spinning helplessly in the void. Crews cried out, some begging for mercy, others praying to gods long forgotten. And through it all, the human frigate remained silent, calm, almost merciful. The Admiral, his face pale, slammed his fist against the console. "Retreat! All ships retreat!" But retreat was chaos. Engines sputtered, navigation failed, and only a handful of ships managed to pull away. The rest floated broken, like wreckage in an invisible tide. On Varys below, the people watched from the shelters. They saw the human ship standing alone against the might of the Empire, and winning without effort. Hope filled their hearts. For the first time, they whispered not in fear but in awe. "The Terrans, they protect us." When the last of the surviving Empire ships limped away, the human captain finally spoke. His voice echoed not only across comms but through hacked transmissions that reached every corner of the Empire. "Your attack has failed. We do not seek war, but if you force us to defend, you will not like the outcome. Remember this, Mercy. We could have destroyed you. Instead, we let you live. Do not test us again." The message spread like wildfire. From the lowest colonies to the halls of nobility, every ear heard the warning. And with it came a single truth. If one human frigate could break an entire armada, what could their full fleets do? In the Empire's capital, riots broke out. Citizens marched with banners calling for peace with humans. Soldiers deserted, whispering that no weapon could save them. Nobles turned against one another, some demanding war, others begging for surrender. Emperor raged in his palace. He shattered tables, screamed at his advisors, demanded answers from his scientists. But no answer came. The humans had shown their hand, and it was stronger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And yet, despite their victory, the humans did not advance. They did not invade, did not conquer. They simply returned to silence, watching, waiting, as though the clash at Varus had been nothing more than a warning shot. To the Emperor, that restraint was worse than defeat. Because restraint meant confidence. Restraint meant they did not see the Empire as a threat at all. And deep in his heart, the Emperor realized a truth he could not admit. The Empire had just lost its first war without the humans ever calling. It won. The Battle of Varus should have been a triumph of the Empire. By every calculation, by every measure of history, no single ship should have stood against an entire fleet. And yet, when the smoke cleared and the stars fell quiet, the galaxy whispered one undeniable truth. The humans had won. But more than victory, they had revealed something worse, a new reality. Across the Empire's 1,000 worlds, word spread faster than fire. Traitors carried the story. Soldiers told it in hushed voices. Civilians repeated it as rumor until rumor became fact. One frigate had broken a fleet. One human voice had silenced the roar of an empire. On distant mining colonies, workers lifted their heads from the dust and smiled. If the humans can stop them, they whispered, then maybe we can be free. On slave worlds where chains had rattled for centuries, people dared to dream of rebellion. On conquered planets, the once silent looked to the stars and waited for Terran ships to arrive. Inside the military, cracks grew wider. Admirals argued in private chambers, their voices sharp with fear. Some demanded vengeance, calling for the largest armada in history to strike the humans with overwhelming force. Others shook their heads, whispering that such an armada would only meet the same fate as Varus. Younger officers began to question orders. They wondered aloud if serving the Emperor still meant survival, or if loyalty to him was now a death sentence. In the great capital itself, protests filled the streets. Citizens marched, shouting not for war, but for peace. Some even dared to wave banners painted with a simple word, Terrans. The Emperor's guards cracked down hard, but the more they silenced, the louder the whispers grew. The Emperor himself sat on his throne, but the throne felt smaller than ever. His once proud empire was slipping through his fingers like sand. He remembered the humans' words, spoken with calm certainty after the battle. Do not mistake kindness for weakness. Those words haunted him, because deep down, he knew they were true. The humans had shown mercy. Mercy, a concept the Empire had never given, never valued. If their roles were reversed, the Empire would have burned Earth to ash, enslaved its people, and displayed their leaders in chains. But the humans had not destroyed. They had disabled. They had warned. And then they had walked away. That restraint terrified him more than any weapon, because only a truly unstoppable power could afford to be merciful. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the galaxy, other empires watched. The Syndicate worlds, long enemies of the Empire, began sending secret envoys to the humans, whispering offers of alliance. The free colonies sent gifts of rare minerals, hoping to win favor. Even ancient rivals who had warred for centuries paused to ask themselves, if humanity could do this, then who among them could stand against them? The galaxy was shifting, and the Empire was no longer the center. Back on Varus, survivors walked, the streets in awe. They spoke of the human frigate not as a ship but as a savior. To them, it was not technology they saw, it was a miracle. And in their stories, the humans became something more than flesh and blood. They became legends. In the Empire's war rooms, the scientists still searched for answers. They dissected the data, analyzed every signal, every flicker, every ripple. But nothing made sense. Their equations failed. Their models collapsed. The oldest scientist finally slammed his notes shut and whispered, "This is not advanced technology. This is impossible technology." The words echoed in the chamber. Impossible. Not superior, not futuristic. Impossible. And with that word, the Empire's illusion of control broke. Because how do you fight the impossible? How do you defeat what cannot exist yet stands in front of you? The Emperor gave new orders. Vast fleets were to be rebuilt. Weapons of unthinkable size were to be forged. If humanity was impossible, Then the Empire would meet impossibility with desperation. He promised his council that the Empire would rise again, that they would not kneel. But as he spoke, even his own generals no longer believed. Because the truth was clear. The Empire had already lost something greater than ships, greater than battles. They had lost fear's weapon. For the first time in history, the galaxy feared someone else. The humans. And in the silence of the stars, as the Empire licked its wounds, the humans simply watched. They did not invade. They did not conquer. They did not claim. They only waited, calm, patient, and ready, because they knew something the rest of the galaxy did not yet understand. This was only the beginning.